Tales of Herding Gods, Chapter 475, Chapter Translator Ninetales, Editor Dark Gem. Pan Gong So's gaze flickered like a wavering candle in the wind as he muttered to himself, hesitation churning within his heart. Qin Mu's proposal carried the scent of sincerity, yet beneath that calm surface lurked a web of cunning intent. Should Pan Gong So dare to defy the oath, it would mean the complete collapse of his soul worship shaman spell. The very foundation of his terror. The moment he violated it, death would descend upon him without mercy. And once that forbidden art lost its power, the dread he inspired would fade like mist before the rising sun. His divine technique would vanish from the world, leaving no successor to inherit its legacy. From that moment on, Pan Gong So would no longer be a looming nightmare. In truth, the reason Qin Mu had been able to contend with him, and even force him into miserable defeat, was precisely because the soul worship shaman spell held no dominion over him. Against any other opponent, even those standing 1 or 2 realms above him, Pan Gong So's art would have sealed their fate beyond doubt. Death would be their only ending. Only Qin Mu, whose very name was false, could endure Pan Gong So's ultimate technique, dragging him down into a fair and brutal confrontation. "All right," Pan Gong So declared without the slightest pause, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Let us swear an oath before Shaman God Kui." Without delay, he activated the soul worship shaman spell. An ancient altar rose behind him as if summoned from the depths of time itself, and upon it manifested the looming phantom of Shaman God Kui. The 2 men swiftly forged their oath before the divine presence, each scrutinizing the other's words with razor-sharp vigilance, searching for hidden flaws. In an instant, both realized the same truth. They were both exceedingly cunning, and though only a handful of loopholes remained, each one was a concealed trap. "This old fox!" Qin Mu cursed inwardly. "This little fox!" Pan Gong So echoed in silent fury. Drawing in a trembling breath, Pan Gong So spoke. "I concealed Shaman God Kui's corporeal body within Yang Mountain, at the southernmost edge of the great ruins. His primordial spirit lies suppressed in Yin Mountain, at the northernmost boundary. Seek those 2 places, and you will find him." He lifted his gaze toward Qin Mu beyond the mirror, his eyes sharp as blades. "Cult Master Qin, you should now fulfill your promise." Qin Mu yawned lazily, a faint smile playing upon his lips. "You must have set some kind of seal, haven't you? Why not enlighten me?" Pan Gong So's smile twisted into something cold and hollow. "Cult Master, our oath did not include such matters, and even if I told you, would you believe me?" "I wouldn't dare," Qin Mu replied with a chuckle. "But my promise not to kill you does not mean the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor will show the same restraint." Pan Gong So burst into laughter. His form dissolved into a streak of black shadow, slipping through the mirror before reforming in his true body. His expression was calm, almost amused. "The Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is locked in battle with true Heaven Old Mother. They stand at the peak of their powers, evenly matched. Victory cannot be easily decided." He circled Qin Mu twice like a predator sizing up its prey, then suddenly struck with a laugh. "Cult Master Qin, our oath only binds you from killing me. It says nothing about me taking this chance to kill you." Qin Mu's expression shifted abruptly. He retreated swiftly, yet Pan Gong So pressed forward with relentless ferocity, laughter echoing as his suppressed humiliation poured out in a storm of attacks. Each move he unleashed was fierce and unrestrained, every strike a release of pent-up fury. Qin Mu struggled under the assault. Their strengths were nearly equal. If Pan Gong So maintained this offensive while Qin Mu remained on the defensive, the balance would tilt inexorably in Pan Gong So's favor, and in the end, Qin Mu would fall. "Grandmaster," Qin Mu suddenly said with a smile, drawing his sword in a flash of cold light as he counterattacked. "My oath forbids me from killing you, but it does not forbid me from severing your limbs. Fear not, little brother, I am skilled in healing. Even if I cut off your head, I can ensure you live. At worst, I'll simply attach it to a pig's body." Pan Gong So nearly lost an arm to that sudden strike and leapt back in fury, his anger erupting like wildfire. "You bastard! You bastard!" Qin Mu shot back just as fiercely. "Didn't you also hide your intentions, waiting to scheme against me?" Pan Gong So darted left and right, evading the attacks before slapping his Tao Ti sack, A sword case burst forth, and countless flying swords soared into the heavens, forming the 6th writing of Dao sword. 7 unusual-looking golden lotuses, fondness of the generous Qing dynasty. This was the Dao sect's sword art of the 7 stars realm. The blades arranged themselves into 7 celestial stars, transforming into radiant lotuses that embodied the 5 elements and drew upon the power of sun and moon. Its might was both profound and unpredictable. Qin Mu roared as he unleashed the same 6th writing of Dao sword. The 2 sword arts collided with a thunderous clash, sending Pan Gongso flying backward. Without hesitation, he plunged into the earth, vanishing beneath the surface. "Fatty dragon!" Qin Mu shouted as he charged forward. "I'll wound him! You kill him!" With that, he too dove into the ground. Far away, the dragon Qilin had been watching anxiously, not daring to approach. Upon hearing Qin Mu's command, he rushed forward in panic. But before he could reach them, the desert erupted 10 miles away. 2 figures burst into the sky, and just as the dragon Qilin hurried toward them, teleportation runes flashed. Their forms vanished once more. They reappeared another 10 miles away, swords clashing in a storm of sparks. "These 2 are both masters of escape. How am I supposed to catch them?" The dragon Qilin grumbled helplessly. As he prepared to chase again, they vanished yet again. Sword lights filled the sky, scattering blood like crimson rain. "Cult Master, stop going forward!" the dragon Qilin shouted in alarm, his expression changing drastically. "That's the battlefield of the Imperial Preceptor and True Heaven Old Mother." Qin Mu pursued relentlessly, while Pan Gongso fled with gritted teeth, plunging into the raging sandstorm. Qin Mu followed without hesitation. The winds howled violently, whipping sand into a terrifying storm. Lightning cracked across the sky, thunder roared, and grains of sand struck like countless tiny spirit weapons, tearing at his flesh with searing pain. "True Dragon Overlord body!" Qin Mu shouted. He unleashed the fusion of 9 Dragon Monarch technique and Overlord body 3 elixir technique. His vital chi surged like a coiling dragon, wrapping around his body. Blood roared through his veins like rushing rivers, and his muscles crackled with the force of thunder and lightning. The sand struck him, but rebounded harmlessly. Twin rays of divine light burst from his eyes, vaporizing any sand before it could reach them. Though his vision was limited in the storm, Pan Gongso remained within range. Qin Mu lunged forward once more. Beneath Pan Gongso's feet floated a massive shield etched with tortoise patterns. It radiated light, forming layers upon layers of protective tortoiseshell around his body. The wealth of treasures he possessed was beyond imagination. When the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stormed the Golden Palace, Pan Gongso must have taken nearly all the spirit treasures accumulated over 10,000 years. This shield was clearly among the most formidable. Within the storm, both men struggled to maintain their footing. The violent winds tossed them like leaves, and even their spirit weapons could not stray far without being swept away. Lightning struck the desert around them. Suddenly, a terrifying spatial pulse surged forth. Both men trembled violently as they were flung upward. Space itself warped unpredictably, stretching and compressing their bodies from 18 feet tall to barely 5 feet. The distortion was agonizing. Whoosh! A massive black sun rolled past, radiating searing heat that ignited the surrounding sands into a raging fire tornado. Qin Mu and Pan Gongso were caught within it, their bodies swept into the blazing vortex as it spiraled violently into the sky. Ding, ding, ding! Their swords clashed over 100 times within the inferno before a single horizontal slash split the fire tornado apart. Spinning uncontrollably, they had no time to recover before a colossal sand snake, 300 yards thick, roared and lunged at them with its gaping maw. Qin Mu sprinted wildly to evade it, while Pan Gongso tumbled through the air on the opposite side. Both barely escaped. Yet the ground-shaking rumble as the creature burrowed beneath the sand caused them to cough up blood from the sheer force of the vibrations. The battle between True Heaven Old Mother and the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was too terrifying. Even the aftershocks alone were enough to kill them. Pan Gongso finally burst out of the sandstorm, but at that moment, thunderous footsteps echoed across the desert. Both men froze in shock. A vast landmass was moving across the sands. Wherever it passed, space twisted, sending ripples outward. Normally invisible, space itself became visible under the crushing force of Sunship. "Run!" Pan Gong So screamed, but his voice was swallowed by the storm. Qin Mu tried to flee, even using Cripple's heaven-pilfering divine legs, but the winds were too powerful. A divine aura surged toward them, and both spat blood upon impact. Even Qin Mu's true dragon overlord body and Pan Gong So's shield could not withstand it. Though both stood at the peak of Seven Stars Realm, just a step from Celestial Being Realm, they were powerless before the might of gods. Bang, bang. Qin Mu clung desperately to one of Sunship's legs, unable to move. His face distorted under the force of the wind, and a spatial ripple stretched his body over 20 feet long. His mind sharpened strangely, his vision warping. Beside him, Pan Gong So was similarly stretched like a strand of dough, clinging tightly to another leg. As the ripple passed, the winds weakened slightly. Qin Mu raised his sword and spun forward, slashing along the leg toward Pan Gong So. Pan Gong So stood upon the tortoiseshell shield and raised his sword to block, but a deep gash opened across his leg. Boom! Another ripple burst outward, flinging them into the air and compressing their bodies into spheres. At that instant, Qin Mu saw a dazzling sword light cleave through the sandstorm. The Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor, strode onto Sunship amidst the raging distortions, his blade slicing through the head of true Heaven Old Mother between the four pillars. Yet she smiled cruelly. Behind the Imperial Preceptor, the immense black sun descended. It crushed nearly everything upon Sunship, rolling across it and flipping the massive structure before it finally came to a halt. Qin Mu was swept away by the storm once more, the tempest devouring more of the burning desert. Even the dragon Qilin was caught within it, struggling helplessly. At last, both he and Qin Mu surrendered to the storm's will, allowing it to carry them into the unknown. Translator. Ninetales. Dark Gem. After the storm subsided, Qin Mu struggled his way out from within the towering sand dune, pushing aside the loose grains as he crawled forth and surveyed the surroundings. Reflected in his gaze was a silent, desolate desert, devoid of life. Only dunes shaped like overlapping scales remained, remnants left behind after the hurricane had howled across the land. The colossal Sunship lay shattered into countless fragments, utterly destroyed. It was evident that the might contained within true Heaven Old Mother's final strike had been terrifying beyond measure. When she unleashed that blow, her heart had been set on dragging Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor down with her into ruin. The consequence of such resolve was the complete destruction of the Sunship as well. The flames that once raged across the desert had vanished. Though the sands still glowed with a faint red hue, the blazing fire that had once tormented the abandoned people of the great ruins had entirely disappeared. Qin Mu cast his gaze into the distance, yet he could no longer see any trace of them. The flaming desert had been extinguished. A tremor passed through his heart, and he hastily raised his hand. The flame markings that had once covered his skin had also vanished without a trace. He hurriedly took out several mirrors, lifting them up and down, examining himself from different angles, yet still he found no sign of the flame markings. True Heaven Old Mother is dead. Qin Mu's heart began to pound wildly. The flames laid down by True Heaven Old Mother had been crafted specifically to target the abandoned people of the great ruins. Any who stepped into this desert would bear flame markings upon their faces, and the purer their bloodline, the more markings would manifest. For instance, Qin Mu's flame markings had once spread across his entire body, but now that True Heaven Old Mother had perished, the flames within the desert had vanished as well. The flame markings that burdened the abandoned people had likewise disappeared. In the distance, one of the sand dunes suddenly split open, and from within it, the dragon Qilin struggled free, coughing and spitting out sand. Qin Mu waved toward him from afar and limped forward. His injuries were grievous, yet they had not come from his battle against Pan Gong So. Rather, it was the terrifying shockwave unleashed by True Heaven Old Mother's final strike that had wounded him so heavily. The dragon Qilin hurried over to Qin Mu's side and lowered his tail. Qin Mu stepped onto its tip, and with a lift, the dragon Qilin raised him up, allowing him to slide smoothly onto its back. Without pause, the dragon Qilin dashed toward the remains of the Sunship. Qin Mu settled himself and called out loudly, Imperial Preceptor, are you still alive? I'm over here. The voice of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor drifted from nearby. Qin turned toward the sound and saw him resting beneath the shade of a massive rock. With a faint smile, Qin slid down from the dragon Qilin's back. You're injured again? Not too serious. The damage is much lighter than the last time. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor closed his eyes as though drifting into slumber. Then he opened one eye slightly, glancing behind him as he spoke weakly. True Heaven, Old Mother, was indeed formidable. By borrowing the power of the Sunship, she surpassed even the gods of high heavens. Qin followed his gaze, yet saw nothing. Confusion flickered within him, but he first focused on tending to his own wounds. Afterward, he attempted to move the Imperial Preceptor, only to realize he was unable to do so. Cult Master, you can't lift a god. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor remarked with a faint smile that did not quite reach his eyes. Understanding dawned on Qin, and he moved closer to treat him. Imperial Preceptor still intends to ascend to high heavens? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor shook his head. When we exchanged blows just now, True Heaven Old Mother held the advantage of terrain, and I nearly lost. If I were to go to high heavens, there would still be gods awaiting me, and that is their domain. It would be even more perilous than what I have just faced. I must wait until the Emperor and other cult master-level existences also ascend to godhood. Within the Eternal Peace Empire, there were numerous powerful practitioners at the Divine Bridge Realm who had been trapped at that stage for many years. Qin spread of the space algebra model for repairing the Divine Bridge had granted them a path forward, a chance to become gods. You let Grandmaster go? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor asked. Qin spoke earnestly as he examined his injuries. I made an agreement with him not to take his life, yet restraining him without harming him is exceedingly difficult. Grandmaster's ability to escape is unmatched beneath the heavens. I have never seen someone so slippery. Still, I managed to sever half of his leg. Letting him escape will only bring greater trouble in the future. Even I cannot defend against his soul worship shaman spell. Very few know my true name, but if he were to investigate at River Tomb, he could uncover it. The Emperor's name could also be discovered, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said solemnly. Qin took out numerous silver needles and transformed him into a porcupine. As he inserted the final needle into the heart of his brows, he smiled. To me, Grandmaster is no longer a concern. The god behind him is Shaman God Kui. He was defeated by Grandmaster, who tore apart both his body and spirit. Grandmaster hid his corporeal body in Yang Mountain of the Great Ruins, and his primordial spirit in Yin Mountain. As long as we eliminate the primordial spirit of Shaman God Kai, we can break Grandmaster's soul worship shaman spell. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor glanced at him indifferently. What if Grandmaster moves faster than you and relocates Shaman God Kui's primordial spirit? Qin froze, then suddenly slapped the Imperial Preceptor's thigh, causing him to wince in pain. Qin hastily withdrew his hand and quickly refined several furnaces of spirit pills. Grandmaster's medical skills are formidable, only slightly inferior to mine. He won't die even after losing half a leg. Stay here, I'll head to Yin Mountain. Remember to take your medicine on time. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor took out the black tortoise bead and tossed it to him. Take this, just in case. Qin left behind several bags of water and food before leaping onto the dragon Qilin's back and departing swiftly. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor leaned against the massive rock and attempted to rise, but collapsed immediately. Breathing heavily, he let out a bitter smile. Injured to such a state again. Luckily, when this little scoundrel of a cult master shoved the black tortoise bead into True Heaven Old Mother's hand, she didn't act. Otherwise, I would truly have been played to death by him. A lingering unease stirred within him. Time and again, Qin had pushed both the black tortoise bead and the green dragon bead into True Heaven Old Mother's hands, probing her limits, yet he had not considered that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor might not be as powerful as he imagined. That fellow had more confidence in Imperial Preceptor than even the Imperial Preceptor himself. Walking beside Qin only multiplied the dangers endlessly. Luckily that brat is gone. Yin Mountain is dangerous, but being around him is even more dangerous. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor lay down to recuperate. At that moment, behind the massive rock where he rested, sand began to swirl silently, gathering together to form a towering sand giant, Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor appeared oblivious, soft snores escaping his throat. Yet slowly, his eyes opened. His hand moved subtly as he drew out the silver needle Qin had embedded in the heart of his brows. It was no ordinary needle. It was the carefree sword. Gripping it, Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor narrowed his eyes and suddenly thrust the blade into the rock behind him. At that very moment, the sand giant was grinning, poised to strike. The carefree sword pierced straight through its heart. With a thunderous explosion, 8,000 sword lights erupted in all directions, bursting forth from the giant's body. The carefree sword trembled, and the 8,000 swords returned, their tips dripping with divine blood. They merged together, forming a sword pellet the size of a tangerine. Leaning against the rock, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor allowed the sword pellet to circle around before returning to his side. "Thanks." He smiled faintly and flicked the pellet away. It whistled through the air and vanished into the distance. Behind the rock, the sand giant crumbled slowly, divine blood pouring out as it collapsed. More and more blood seeped into the ground, dyeing it crimson. Meanwhile, the dragon Qilin sprinted eastward when Qin raised his hand and beckoned. The sword pellet shot through the air and landed in his palm. The dragon Qilin suddenly stumbled, tumbling forward. Qin tucked the sword pellet into his Tao-Ti sack and smiled. "True Heaven Old Mother is finally dead." Startled, the dragon Qilin exclaimed, "She was still alive? Didn't the flame markings on your body vanish and the desert flames go out? How could she still be alive?" "She's cunning. She created the illusion of death to deceive us." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also pretended to believe it, but he gave me a warning glance. When I treated him, I transformed the carefree sword into a needle and embedded it into his brow. Qin smiled. He gave me the black tortoise bead because he feared it might fall into her hands, making her even harder to deal with. Now she is truly dead. If you don't believe me, look behind. The dragon Qilin turned to look and saw a vast crimson sea spreading rapidly. Formed from divine blood, it devoured the desert as it surged toward them. The sight was terrifying beyond words. The dragon Qilin bolted away. After fleeing over 100 miles, the Red Sea finally ceased expanding. The dragon Qilin asked, "Did she bleed that much?" Her divine blood reverted to mortal blood. Naturally, there would be more of it. Qin also glanced back, seeing multicolored sunlight shimmering above the Red Sea. Along its shores, dense vegetation sprouted wildly. Even in a barren desert, life still found a way to endure. It's the same for humans. No matter how harsh the environment, they will always find a way to survive. Opening his cinnabar heaven's eyes, he gazed into the distance. The shattered remains of the sunship had formed an island at the center of the Red Sea. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had climbed onto it, avoiding the blood. "Remember to take your medicine on time." Qin waved and urged the dragon Qilin onward. Pangong So sat atop a cluster of cattail leaves carried by the wind, sealing his wounds. By the time he returned to the great ruins, 3 days had passed and dusk was descending. During those 3 days, he had treated his injuries, yet his right lower leg had been severed by Qin, leaving his movement hindered. Pangong So surveyed his surroundings, his eyes lighting up. Following a herd of strange beasts, he arrived at a ruin just as darkness fell. "Qi!" He raised his hand and severed the leg of a buck. The beast growled in pain, emitting threatening sounds. Pangong So opened his Tao-Ti sack, releasing a swarm of soul bugs. With a cold sneer, he said, "You dare provoke me? Mere beasts. I may not be able to deal with that Qin brat, but slaughtering all of you is effortless." The other strange beasts saw the swarm of soul bugs and did not dare approach recklessly. "Grandmaster is truly imposing." Suddenly, a voice echoed from within the ruins, calm and leisurely. For the Grandmaster of Roland's Golden Palace to be reduced to bullying beasts, how laughable. "Who is it?" Pangong So immediately attached the buck's leg to his own. Disregarding proper alignment, he rose swiftly as a chest flew out from the depths of the ruin. Bang! The chest burst open. 2 legs leapt out, followed by 2 arms and a torso, assembling piece by piece into a headless body. It reached into the chest, retrieved a head, and set it upon its neck. Grandmaster, do you not recognize an old friend? The strange body turned, revealing a youth with red lips and white teeth, a bewitching smile playing upon his face. Pangong So's expression turned ashen.